Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Marita Vlachou, and I'm an editor for HuffPost. We're here to discuss how AI is transforming education by reshaping learning, creativity, and intelligence. Here on the stage with me, Dora Palfi, the CEO and founder of Imagi, and Vasilis Koutsoumpas, an AI advisor to the Prime Minister of Greece. So thank you both for being here. I'm going to start with you, Dora. So what's one thing about AI's role in education that you think people commonly misunderstand or underestimate?
I think, like most people, when they think on AI in education, are still stuck in the idea that, like, oh, but kids are using AI to cheat, or if we let them use AI, they're just going to use it to cheat. But like at this point already, 4 out of 5 students are using AI. So I think when it comes to the conversation whether we should let them use it, we're kind of like way past. And what we have to focus on is actually how do we make sure that they use it safely and responsibly and not risking their own cognitive development and their mental health.
How do we make sure they use it safely? Do you want to give us the government perspective on that?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Let me exhale some of the anxiety. It's been a big day for us. We just signed a partnership with 11 Labs, so it's been intense and back-to-back. My name is Vasilis. I serve as the AI advisor to the Prime Minister, and education is for us a big topic. So what we saw when we did a partnership with one of the leading frontier AI labs is that students are already using artificial intelligence, which will come as no surprise to you. 71% or something, and then teachers were also using different tools with no framework in place, right? And we started an effort about a year ago to see how we can incorporate it responsibly. The hardest part wasn't the technology. The hardest part is trying to take that technology and incorporate it into government structures, into an educational system that has not been built to incorporate that technology in it. Most of our governments, especially in the European Union, they've been built for a post-90s, 60s, 90s, 70s world. The government operating system, so the basic bureaucratic processes around government, they're not meant to keep up pace with technology, and especially AI. It's like, you're trying to incorporate 2030s technology into 90s, 60s structures. It's like having an iPhone 11 and trying to update it to the current iOS. It's going to lag, right? So what it requires at the same time is a huge structural update, and especially when it comes to the educational system, because the modern educational system, not just in Greece, hasn't been built for students. It's built for the working parent, the 9 to 5. So how do you take that and you upgrade it? So we worked on 3 fronts. The one is the framework front. Before getting started, there was no actual framework as to how do you incorporate artificial intelligence in secondary education in Greece. That's what we're focusing on. So what you do, what you don't do, what are the dangers, how a teacher should behave when, incorporating it into creating a certain kind of curriculum. We worked with that, and we brought together different partners, the Onassis Foundation, a local NGO called Tipping Point, OpenAI, which is our technology partner, and we kind of created that framework as to what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. The second part was the organizational one, the structural one, when it came to the teachers. We wanted to make sure that they were part of the process from day one, right? So we started this huge workshop that took over 3 months where we spoke with teachers and worked with different organizations to train them as to, from what is an LLM to how do I do prompt engineering, right? And then work with them to incorporate our national corpus from chemistry to physics to literature and so on to create custom-made GPTs that they're now using in classrooms. And now the third one, which was the hardest, was the actual deployment, right? Because imagine this. You have in the same room a teacher, a solutions engineer from a frontier AI lab, the technical people from your local Ministry of Digital Governance or your Ministry of Education, and they're all speaking 3 or 4 different languages, right? So the technology is really good. There's a lot of willingness to incorporate it, but you have to find the right pieces that make sense so that the recipe comes out right. So after a lot of pushing from our side, we're now at 5,000 students nationally. More than 400 teachers are using those tools in a responsible and safe manner. And ideally, next year, we're looking to somehow expand it.
Mm-hmm. But how do you address the concerns that come with that, like from a product side for you, Dora?
I mean, I think, so like this example is one of the very unique ones where I think it's coming very like top down in a country where like the leadership is pushing out. And I think something similar is happening, for example, in Estonia. I was there last week on the AI Lead project, but I think where we come in, so with Imagi, we essentially are partnering with AI tools and take care of the safety and compliance for the under 18 users. We work a lot in the US, we have some projects, for example, in Singapore, and in places where maybe there's a lot of teachers or specific schools or a specific school district that wants to use it, but there is no like push from the top. And so then their concerns are around like the privacy of their students, like their data. And then their concerns are around the guardrails. Like, of course, there is a lot of media coverage, especially around like mental health, students using AI as a companion. And so right now there is like very clear regulation around like the data protection, but there is no clear regulation around like AI interaction and minors. So there are some sort of like basics, for example, in the US, like an AI needs to disclose that it is an AI periodically so that minors will understand that they shouldn't just like trust everything. So like our work at Imagi is focusing on like putting all of this into place for various AI tools, and instead of sort of like just building a tool like that's just for education, I think our approach is very similar. Why don't we actually take the tools that you will use in the industry, so actually prepare the next generation for like the actual AI tools they'll be using once they enter the workforce, and make them sort of like safe and compliant. And I think the piece I was also mentioning earlier, so of course there's the safety, but then there's also, I think, this concern of just like, AI slop, like, or like young people actually going to develop their cognitive abilities. So I think there's also this question around like kind of like productive struggle. So in education, we always reference this productive struggle, because if you just get answers, like if you can just ask for information directly, then you're not going to like learn anything. You're not going to like gain that knowledge. And so when it comes to like even the LLMs, like there have been now work to kind of introduce, like essentially study mode, which is what like OpenAI did, where the idea is that you're not just like getting the response as in our like regular ChatGPT, but you actually are engaging in this Socratic methodology where you are going through like a thought process. So I think that piece of also like protecting brain development is really important.
Mm-hmm. Of course, these guardrails are important, but undoubtedly AI is changing our definition of intelligence. So what skill do you guys think will matter most, like going forward, let's say in a decade from now? If you want to go first, Vasily.
I'll answer that, but I also want to say that for us, using the technology itself for the sake of the technology is not the point, right? I think the biggest, positive of all this is that making sure that the tech dividend, right, which are the financial, economical, social benefits that derive from technology, are spread out throughout the community and the society, right? And I think that artificial intelligence, and when you're incorporating in education, can be the great equalizer. I grew up in a very small city near Athens, for anyone who knows it, called Livadia, which is around 20,000 people, right? And it was a public high school. So a person who lives in that city can have access to, to infinite knowledge in your pocket. That's like a really bad way to put it. But the point is they can have access, a student from the outskirts of Livadia, to the same technology and knowledge that a person who went to a private school in Athens has, or even abroad, right? And this has an intrinsic, tech dividend inside it, which means that you can deliver education with a deep sense of equality, right? So for us, I think this is really important. Now, to your point, I think the funniest part of this project is that, the teachers or the government or anyone will, kind of explain to children and students how to use AI, right? Because many a times they're way more, not many, most of the times they're way more advanced than what we're doing. So I think there's an inherent kind of adaptability and flexibility in their mindset, right? And they know how to adjust to new circumstances, and that's why younger generations are usually more prolific in using these tools. But I think that's a bigger lesson for everyone. I think artificial intelligence gives us the opportunity, especially in classrooms, right? And which we just said, it's a setting that's not built for the 2030s, to ask why not? Why not do things a certain way, or a different way, or the other way? And I feel like that has been the biggest problem when it comes to incorporating at least technology in government, right? Every government, no matter whether they are conservative, centrist, progressive in ideology, they tend to be conservative in their approach, right? Conservative in process. And to a point, it makes sense. Government is usually, working with very delicate data, with very delicate information, and so on. But the point of not staying behind in the AI race is being willing to take a leap and not take a risk, but be vigilant in what you can pursue. So I would say adaptability and flexibility.
Okay. So what does an AI native classroom look like, taking all of this into consideration?
Yes, I'll respond to that. But also,
Okay,
I was just listening this morning to a podcast on, like kind of like the Pope's declaration around AI, and I think this whole idea of like AI might be more intelligent in some ways than humans, and it is surpassing our intelligence. But I think like what you're saying also is, by the end of the day, like I guess we operate based on the assumption that like humans are not like a means, but to like the purpose of creating all these structures. So then it doesn't really matter whether like AI can surpass you in some specific task, or maybe even in general intelligence at some point. It's about how do we actually build that human intelligence as well. And so kind of like this work is about that. And I think that kind of ties into the AI native classroom, because once like AI can do everything that's sort of like standardized. Like so much of the education system has like recently just been built on like standardized testing, and like AI can just do that for you. Then like our teens and kids will like not have any motivation to learn and prepare for those tests, because they'll be like, what's the point of this, right? So then you actually have to rethink of like what are the skills that are relevant, and that's probably that sort of like collaboration ability with AI. And so I think the way how you can actually bring that into the education is, on one hand, I do think there has to be some kind of like class on what is AI, so that you have agency, you understand how the technology works, you understand that, large language models are just spitting out sort of like predictions, right? Like it's not like the truth. But on the other hand, you actually have to just like bring it across the curriculum. And I think that is sort of like to your approach. Like it can be in chemistry, it can be another subject. The point is that like you bring in AI as a thought partner, you can essentially require a lot more of your students now that they have these AI tools, and so then the ambition level can increase. So I think, like the analogy that they keep using in education is sort of like the calculator, right? Like when the calculators were introduced, like math teachers were protesting because they thought like math education was over. But the point is that like you learn the fundamentals, and then you essentially use the new technology to just sort of like supercharge what you can achieve, and then you can expect more of your students. And so to me, like kind of like that AI native classroom means that you can have a project-based learning, and then you can have things like, I don't know, we're practicing like public speaking, then maybe you use 11 Labs to create a voice agent, and that's gonna teach you on how to create it, but it's also gonna train you on better public speaking, and maybe you use like Lovable Gamma or like another AI tool to create your slides. So essentially, as if it would be in the real world, that you like plug it in across the learning environment.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned the teachers piece earlier, right? And I feel like this technology, the thing that feels different to us is how fast it's all accelerating. It feels like one thing we knew, we could do yesterday, like we can do it 10 times faster today. So there is always a concern about, both students and teachers like staying behind, right? Because not all teachers were educated like as recently, as the newer ones. So how do you make sure that, teachers are sort of open to this and sort of help manage the transition to this technology, given they're at the forefront of this and have the daily interaction with the students? I don't know if either of you want to.
I mean, yeah, we definitely have to play a big role in that. I want to point out that the biggest fear when it comes to AI, usually, again, it's not that it's going to come and replace teachers or so on, at least that's from what we're seeing, is that it challenges you to rethink the norms, right? And I think this is the biggest fear when it's coming in an organization, in a company, in government, in class, because it's saying to you, intelligence has been this thing for X years, or you were taught to teach that way for X number of years. Now you need to rethink that, because some things, the baseline of some things is provided to you, right? So we have obviously a certain predisposition towards change and evolution. We're a bit fearful. We're fan of keeping it simple. So I think that's the biggest challenge. What we've seen is that teachers themselves, once they started getting training and access to the technology, not only were they asking for more, but the truth is that they got even more creative with it, right? And we've had them reach out to us and say, are you gonna, different schools that were not part of the program, are you gonna expand it anytime soon? So I think that the biggest fear is that it's changing the way we've gotten used to working and the way that the processes inside a classroom have been working for X amount of time. And that's a big exercise for the government as well, right? To rethink modern day classroom, to say that what we've been doing since the 60s and the 70s doesn't work anymore, and we need to restructure it from the beginning. But that also requires somehow some kind of societal support as well, right? You can't do it by yourself. And the second point is that, build it and they'll come, to kind of reference the movie, right? If you give people the opportunity and access to the tools and make sure that you have a proper mechanism, for example, the partnership we did with Tipping Point, that local NGO, to support them in the process of using those tools, like believe in them and you will see them accomplish wonders. We saw a teacher in one of those schools create a custom-made GPT to handle like internal processes in school, like how certain hours are being allocated and who's going to teach when, and then he shared it with the rest of the teachers. So they're finding new ways that we didn't think, and that's the point with having they're power users, right? Because teachers, after they get the training, they know their job better than the government does or better than a tech company does. And then they themselves, when they've started using the technology, they say, okay, this is my workflow, this is how I'm incorporating it, and I'm going to make that change.
Yeah. Are you having a similar experience like on your side of things?
Yeah, so I think like you two, like essentially like partnering up with the educators themselves and then involving them in the process is really important. I guess just like when you develop a tech product for consumers, it's the same way like you should be engaging your end users, do that like user-centered design. And I think to your point, like that's what we've seen as well. Like you need to design these like experiences where there's a aha moment like very quickly, where you like vibe code something or use an AI tool, and then you suddenly see how this is going to be either saving you a ton of time, making processes simpler, or yeah, like one example I think like a librarian, like literally in I think like 15 minutes vibe coded this like kind of like quiz game for her students, where like they come in, they make this quiz, and then they get like 4 books recommended that they should read. That's actually in the library, right? So like these are super, super quick things and very tangible. And so I think if you design kind of like not just access to the tools, but like the delivery and the training in a way where they have really quick wins, then people will be asking for more. And yeah, teachers are usually there not because the pay is so great, but because they are very mission driven. So I think if they see how this empowers them to actually just provide better learning experiences, then suddenly everyone is on the same page.
How early on do you think children these days are getting familiarized with this technology? Is this something you're seeing from the earlier stages in school? Because obviously teens, they'll also experiment with the technology themselves.
I mean, 2 points here. The one is, the argument people are always making is that progress is unavoidable. It's linear, right? And that's how you should be incorporating the technology and AI in classrooms and whatnot. For me, that's not the winning argument, right? It's true. I think progress is linear to a point. You have to fight for it, but it is linear. The point is that there are huge dividends in the incorporation of the technology, and we're seeing it across the board. We saw some internal polling and so on. It's not just we're running this program in high schools, but you have earlier ages using artificial intelligence tools. Sometimes in classrooms without again any proper framework, but otherwise when they're at home alone and by themselves. So at least the way I see government positioning itself in all of this is that there's an inevitability to it, right? So, going there and banning the use of those tools or saying that they should stay out of classroom, it's not just unrealistic, but it's also a huge, long-term challenge and problem that you're inflicting in the younger generation when they're going out there afterwards in the market and then in research jobs and so on, right? But the second is that I think the amount of creativity and productivity that you'll see deriving from the students themselves is going to surprise you, right? Because if you want to have the next builders community come up in Greece, and Panathēnea is a very good example of it, you have to give them the tools from an early age to do that work, right? I see the government's work as doing 2 things. One is staying out of your way and not creating impediments when you want to build. And second, providing the best available platform and the best available tools for you to build. So at least that's how we see technology when it comes to being used by teenagers and children. And obviously there are dangers and risks, right? Our government at least is very big on protecting minors online and mental health. But what would like to see more in Greece, and I'm going to do a parenthesis here and talk a little bit about Panathēnea, is we need more techno-optimism. We need to be talking more about the benefits of technology and about how technology is going to help us not just have a productivity dividend, but at the same time, how much is going to benefit society in the long term. So in panels like this, and that's how we started, we will talk about the risks and the challenges, but it's good to start with opportunity, and what we will be seeing. And I think one of the clearest examples of the leaps that the ecosystem in Greece has done over the past few years, right? And I'm not going to do the thing we do usually when we come from government and say that this is the government's work, right? The ecosystem fought itself out of the harshest of circumstances back in 2016 and 2017, and now it's vibrant. And the biggest proof is not me saying this, but it's this, being here and seeing these people do this. For us, this is not just an inspiration, but it's nudging us as a government to do more, because we're seeing that more is expected from us.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, like the point is like technology and AI is not inherently like good or bad, and I think like lately there have been a lot of headlines like, oh, we shouldn't give screens to young kids, right? And I think the point is like being missed, whether like, of course, if you put a textbook on an iPad and then put it in front of kids, that's not going to be like good technology or engaging learning. But it has to be like a step further than that. Like, how are they actually using it? Is it like an active engagement? Because it is proven that when it's like done well, it actually is more engaging. And of course, like, if kids at home are playing on very engaging games all days, then especially they won't be accepting like the type of education that we received like 30 years ago. So you have to kind of keep up with that. And I think, like, just to that, which I think you also made a point about earlier, like, sort of the equity question, because you can say that, like, oh, no, we shouldn't use these tools, we should block them, but then, like, there's a lot of kids who will be fine because their parents have access to that, they will be given this at home, but actually the ones who will be harmed most are the ones who don't have access to the technology or don't have access to a parent who will actually teach them how to use it safely and responsibly. So you can't just, like, take it so black and white.
Mm-hmm. So as we wrap up here today, what should make us hopeful about the future? Obviously, there's everything we've talked about today. There's huge opportunity, but also risks, that have to be managed. So as we look forward, like, what makes you hopeful about the future?
I mean, I think it's, well, to me, it's like at the same time as we're talking about like, oh, are kids using AI to cheat? There are like kids and teens who are already building stuff with AI that's actually like helpful and productive. Like, I don't know, examples of like health monitoring tools or I don't know, like products that support their community. So it's essentially like our choice, as in like, are we going to support more students to kind of like go a step beyond just like using it for surface level answers and actually support them to become creators. And so I think that should give us hope that it's already happening and we can essentially get more students up to that level where they become innovators and become part of what the future is.
Mm-hmm. And to a broader point, I think, artificial intelligence is a once-in-a-generation technology that gives you the chance to rethink structures, organizations, enterprises, the classroom. On my end, it's government, right? So I think what makes me more hopeful is that re-engineering, like restructuring those institutions for the 2030s. But I'm going to do a shameless promo here and say, if you are from Greece and if you're living in Greece, build and keep building and be as disruptive as possible and challenge us as a government and expect more from us in this sector. Whether you disagree with us on other things or whatever, if we're talking about tech, digital, and AI, we're open, we're here, and we want to build more. If you're not from Greece, there's talent here. There is opportunity, and there's a vibrant ecosystem that's around you, and you're seeing it today and in the next few days. So stay here, build a base here. Just come here for a few months as a digital nomad. But there is room to grow, and we'll make sure to do everything that's in our power and in our hands to make this happen.
Yeah,
Good.
That's really exciting, guys. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today.
Thank you.